Welcome to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Here is your host, certified financial planner, Brad Baldridge.
All right, today I'm talking with Kristin Clark. She's someone that I've known for years, and she's actually helped some of my own children. So welcome, Kristin.
Brad, hello. This is a good day to talk about all things college and finances.
All right, yes, let's jump into it a little bit. First of all, why don't you just tell us a little bit more about what avenues that you work in around the college process?
For sure. So I help my students figure out what kind of career is going to make them happy. What I found out, Brad, when I was getting my own kids into college or thinking about college, is there are so many people around them that are helping them get into college. And what I realized is nobody was helping them figure out what was going to make them happy. And that's really where I kind of swooped in, and I was like, I had finished up my corporate career. I ran marketing departments for years and years, hired a lot of 20-somethings, and figured out that where they really needed the help was figuring out, what kind of life do they want, and making sure that not only they're choosing wisely, but sometimes college isn't the only answer. So really helping them think through that and get to a point where they're excited about work. I always say, let's quit making work a 4-letter word. People can actually enjoy what they do. And that's what I help kids do.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, on that note, then, let's talk a little bit about some of the headlines we're seeing out there, or some of the scare tactics I think that some of the press are using around what's going on with the young people today. And I guess primarily it'd be the job market. And right now, supposedly, the rules that they're talking about is opportunities are down for the typical graduate. What are you finding?
That's for sure. It's no joke out there. And what I'm seeing is that it's taking college students a lot longer to get that first job, at least some of our college students. And we really are seeing that it's a thing. So I don't want parents to think that their kids being lazy or they're not trying. It is more difficult right now to get work. So in fact, what we're seeing is that even on our job boards, that the number of job listings for that lower level employee, that entry level employee, are down about 16%. That's a big number. Yeah.
Right. So things are a little slower now for the typical college graduate. But I guess on the flip side, it's not like no college graduates are getting jobs. There's still certainly plenty of jobs out there, and lots of students are getting them. I think would it be fair to say that maybe employers are getting a little more selective or not rushing into it?
It's more complex than that, for sure, in that because of a lot of things going on in the economy today, we've got a lot of layoffs happening. So not only are these new grads trying to get these jobs, you also have people that are in middle management that are trying to get these entry-level jobs. So that's one piece of it, for sure. The other, and I know this is a big topic that we talk about quite a bit these days, is AI. It's much easier. I always call it the faster, better, cheaper, right? To have AI do a lot of these entry-level gigs versus paying a body to do it.
And I guess my opinion there is AI is not doing it yet, but I think a lot of businesses are pressured into the hype a little bit of we're going to have to figure out how to make them do it. Therefore, maybe we shouldn't hire as quickly. So I think there's a possibility there's some sort of rebound where they realize that to get AI up and running and doing all the things that their new hires used to do is a lot more work than they realize. It's kind of like the driverless car. Driverless car has been coming for 20 years. They're much closer now, and we'll get there. But the actual timeline, I think, for some of these things may be a lot different than people realize.
You're bringing up a really good point on this too, Brad. So there's so much happening around AI, and it's changing so fast. And the reality is our colleges aren't keeping up with it. They don't quite know what to do with it as far as training the college students on how to actually use it. So one of the things that I find with my families right now, I'm like, depending on what you're trying to get into, what career path you're gunning for, they've got to go out there and they've got to see what tools are available and start to just acclimate to it and learn a little bit of this on their own, because the colleges aren't able to do it yet. They're working on it. They're trying, but they're just not quite there yet. So that's a big factor as well.
Absolutely. All right. So I think I would agree that there's lots of change afoot, and therefore families need to kind of understand what they're up against. What about the longer lead time, right? If we're talking about someone that's graduating from college, maybe they just graduated this past May, or they're going to graduate this coming May. Well, they've got what they've got, right? But what about the parents of a high school sophomore or junior, right? Are they supposed to do things differently, or let's talk a little bit about what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, definitely they need to do things differently than what we've done in the past. And one of the things that will help every kid out, hands down, Brad, is having them get jobs now. And I will tell you, this is a little bit of a controversy. I hear parents all the time saying they just don't have the time to do this. And in my mind, the reality is number one, yes, in a lot of cases they do, or we're making possibly some choices that maybe need to be revisited. Like, does a kid need to be in 4 activities at school? Right.
Right.
A lot of times people will ask me, they're like, yeah, but he's in football and that's an all day event. And I agree with them. It is. So during the season, let's not get a job. But after the season, get a job. Right.
Right.
I think what I hear people saying is kind of one of the reasons why I came up with let's quit making work a 4 letter word is that they're like, they've got all the time in the world. They're going to be working after they get out of college. Why are we making them work now? And the reality is, quite frankly, it's a growing up process. It's
Yeah.
teaching them skills that they're not figuring out in sports or in volunteering or in school, taking the AP classes and the dual credits and all that stuff. There's so many benefits to having a job that I think parents need to kind of sit back and think about. Are they thinking about themselves or are they thinking about this kid and what's best for them? I can go on and on about the merits of working, but one of the things I always like to tell my parents is kids that work actually do better in school. They get better grades.
Right.
What does that tell you?
Yes, I would agree with that. Is it the working or is it the interacting with people outside your peer groups? Because I think there's another stereotype that the typical student, doesn't want to talk to anybody. They're terrified of making a phone call. They barely understand how email works and they think it's for old people and therefore they're just not going to do it. So I think there's a lot of that type of thing going on where they want to be on the cutting edge of TikTok and all that type of stuff. And the world's not there. So I think some of working is forcing students to meet the world where the world is.
Yeah, well, Brad, here's the deal. People were physically made to interact with people. I mean, that's how we stay healthy. That's how we have great relationships. And yes, getting out and getting a job forces that hand a little bit instead of them laying in their room and playing video games or just hanging out with the people they know or, doom scrolling. So getting the job helps in that way. And I'll tell you another huge benefit that I saw, and I remember this when my younger son got his job. There were a couple things that happened. Number one, he's like, Mom, do you realize I have to work 2 hours to be able to afford a lunch at Chili's? Right. And I was like, yes,
Yep.
I do understand that. So he would make choices. He would sometimes just go and have, if all of his friends wanted to go to Chili's, he'd go and order a Coke. And that's what he had. Or the other thing that happened is when he had this money and he got to buy what he wanted, because in my mind, I was like, this is your money. You do with it what you want. There's such a huge confidence and like this sense of control that a lot of kids don't have because they're having to ask mom and dad for $20 to go do something. When he wanted to do something, he went and did it because he had this money. So he had control over his life. And it wasn't, it just was this growing up period.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's, again, kind of the challenge of when people are talking about this, what should we do and that type of stuff. I mean, often the right answer is it depends. So that's the other piece of it, right? Is there's a wide spectrum of students out there. And some students are, just in my own kids, my oldest is much more outgoing and was willing to sit down with the adults and have conversations. My other two, not so much, and it shows in the fact that, he was out in the employment from junior year of high school. And he was able to do those things because he just kind of had a proclivity for it. And I think that's the challenge, right? Is some kids are just good at these things and some kids are good at those things. And do those things line up with what employers want is one concern that I think that a lot of families need to understand.
Tell me more. Tell me what you're thinking around that because, I hear this a lot where people say, well, my kid's really shy or you know, they're just not good at that stuff. The reality in my perspective on this, Brad, and I would love to hear yours, is when you're an adult, the expectation is, yes, you can talk to other people. you can make decisions on your own and not be told every step of the way. You do have to just kind of get out there
Mhm.
and make things happen, right?
Yep.
So I look at it and kind of go, is it a chicken and the egg thing?
Absolutely.
If you put your kid in that situation, then they're going to be better at those things.
Right.
Yeah.
So when my daughter was about 13-ish, maybe a little younger, maybe a little older, she was very shy to the
Mhm.
point of she would not order at Starbucks, right? So if we would happen to be at a store, I think if it was a Target, we typically went to that also had a Starbucks in the back. So it'd be like, well, you go get your Starbucks while I check out. And she'd be like, no, I can't do that. You have to order it for me. It's like, okay, well, then I guess we're not having Starbucks. Let's go.
Yay. Yes.
Right. I mean, that's some of the reality of it. Right. And she's since outgrown that, but it was a lot of work to push her out of that. Just mom and dad are going to take care of everything. And so there's a lot of life lessons, I think, around getting your kids to grow up a little, to start interacting with the world. And it's a little bit of a challenge as well from the bad attitude that we often get from our children when we try and encourage them to get out there and do things.
Well, this is a stat that totally killed me inside. I died a little bit inside. And that is that the employers out there, there's so many companies out there right now that are having to hire soft skills coaches. Say that fast, soft skills coaches, because the kids that are coming out of college or those kids getting those first jobs, the 20 somethings, they don't have the soft skills that they need, Brad. And I think that this is a direct correlation to the fact that we've moved away from having these kids have jobs in high school and have even before high school, but high school and college specifically.
Right. Yeah. And again, I think there's still opportunity. Maybe there's less in some regards, but I think there's more in other regards there's more internships and more career related jobs out there than there was when I was young, almost for sure. But there's also jobs in general, right? Bagging at the grocery store and that kind of stuff is still there. But now I think a lot of parents are like, well, that's not career ready, that they need to get the internship at the bank, or they need to get the whatever puts them on their career path.
I'm gonna tell you that I don't think that they're thinking ahead that way. I really don't.
Well, okay. Many parents are not. There's the other side of that crowd of, well, we got to get our kids in the right kindergarten so that we can get them in the right grade school, so that we can get them in the right high school, so we can get them in the right college so they can go to work for Goldman Sachs or whatever, or Google or whatever the big company is that,
Yeah,
right?
that's
So
fair.
there's a subset. And again, that's the challenge with some of the stuff we're talking about is the right answer for any particular situation is a very big, it depends. But for that crowd where they're literally, trying to plan out their child's life from 4 on to 18 and okay, well, they're going to get an internship when they're 16 at this particular, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, you just, triggered me as well. Like because yes, I've seen those parents. I agree with you that have their kids plan, kind of thought through and figured out. And as a career exploration coach and helping the teenagers and 20 somethings really figure that out for themselves, I got to tell you, there's no reason in my mind that a parent should be making those decisions for these kids. Can they guide all day long? But who are they to say what's gonna make their kid happy and what activities those kids are gonna wanna do in a career? So, I think that's a whole whole 'nother show.
Yes.
Yes, but I will tell you that thinking about this idea that the parents are thinking forward, what I've seen is parents really aren't thinking forward at all for the most part in that, is it the right kind of job? What I'm seeing is a lot of parents going, I don't think they should have a job. I see
Right.
more of that. Or just not thinking about it at all, just kind of letting life roll by and not thinking about why not have them get out there and do the babysitting and do the hostessing, etc. But
Right.
even on that accord, I will tell you this. It is a little bit harder for teenagers to get jobs than it was when we were younger. And I see things like companies not wanting to hire teenagers because they just think it's too challenging. But the ones that do it right, I got to tell you, those kids are lining up wanting to work for them, where they are more flexible. They understand that these kids are under pressure in different ways, and they really help work around that. But I'm seeing things like you can't wait tables now until you're 18, 19 years old, which I think is ridiculous. And it's all around alcohol. And
Right.
I was waiting tables. I wasn't, taking the can
Yes.
of whatever, the glass of whatever and drinking it. I was like, oh my gosh, we've gotten so litigious and so weird about certain things that it is a little bit harder for kids to get jobs.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would agree that, and I think once again, it sometimes circles around to the quality of the job, so to speak, where, I mean, there's a whole lot of fast food and that type of stuff that will probably take anybody that's willing to show up and work hard. But that's the challenge, right? Is your teen one of those? Are they willing to show up and work hard, or do they just want the job?
So many will tell me, I don't want to work in fast food. I was like, fast food is like one of the best places to work. You get free food a lot of times. It's fast paced. You're getting to, meet other kids your age. For some reason, Brad, it's like this big thing these days where in the past, that's where we worked, right? It was all fast food.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think, I guess to kind of put a pin in this idea, I think there's a spectrum of parents that are planning. On one end of the spectrum, there's the parents that are literally planning the poor kids to death and trying to figure it all out early on, and you're kind of laying the groundwork and et cetera, which I think is probably a relatively small percentage. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I think there's a whole lot of families that just aren't forward focused hardly at all. They're just, we'll have time for that later. Let the kids be kids. Whatever the reasons, they're kind of moving, avoiding, or either intentionally, again, let the kids be kids. We're not going to burden them with that, or unintentionally in that we're just thinking about other things. So how do we assess where we stand, and then what do we do about it?
Yeah. Here's the part about AI, because I don't know that we kind of finalized that. AI is not going away. So one of the things that we have to do is accept that it's here, accept that it is going to be part of working life moving forward. So I think not being afraid of it and exposing your kids in a way that's positive to show AI not in its evil form, but in its productive, here's how we can use it for. And even in my coaching, we'll go out and we'll do some brainstorming on careers. And I love AI because it's so fast. And kids can see progress so fast because we'll go, oh, what could I do, based on my strengths? What can I do because I like this type of activity? And AI spits out all kinds of stuff, and then we direct it and we ask it more questions. So that's a lot of fun. And it's a great brainstorming tool, right? So not being afraid of it and just helping our kids understand how to use it for good, not evil.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think, right. So AI, I think, is one piece of the puzzle for sure, where we see a lot of challenges around, AI is coming for this job or that job and that type of thing. And we'll probably make a whole episode on that subject. But then once again, figuring out how that fits in. But I think it's also on maybe the entrepreneurial spectrum as well, of how much agency does your student have to say, this is what I'm going to do. This is, versus nobody's calling me and offering me a job. So, what do you want me to do? I mean, I guess we're done here, right? That whole excuses versus you can't control results, but you at least can control activity. And without activity, lots of people say, well, that guy got lucky. He got the job. Really? How many resumes did he send out? And how hard did he work at it? And how many networking meetings did he go to? And how much, how big is his network? Maybe he was lucky and he did none of those things and the job just fell in his lap. Or maybe he worked really, really hard for it.
Right. And I think it's one of those things that always behind the scenes, he probably was making decisions and working towards that. Very few times do we have stuff just fall in our lap, right? We create the opportunities in my mind. And so for high school parents, what can they do to make sure that when their kid gets out of college or they choose a different path, how do they, set their kid up for success? We've talked about the job, getting the jobs so that they have these soft skills, getting the internships. But how do you direct some of that, Brad, to make sure that when they do get out, there's a job to be had? And you know what my answer is going to be, but what do you think they need to be doing?
Yeah. I mean, I guess, first of all, understanding that there's jobs that, and again, now it's a 2-person event, right? Somebody needs to want to hire you in order to get the job. Versus there's also the entrepreneurial side of the world of, I'm just going to go solve some problems and people won't pay me to solve those problems. Well, now you're a business owner potentially, or a consultant, or a influencer, or a lot of jobs out there now, again, may not be at the large corporations. So that's a little different mindset of, well, I'm just going to go, solve a problem or come up with a plan that either other companies need my help for whatever it might be. But, if you can build that robot that cleans my gutters, I'm all in.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's lots of problems out there and we're looking for solutions. And that's the challenge, I think, that a lot of both parents and students need to thinking a little outside of that.
So
And then,
you're dancing around what I'm about to lay
right,
down, right?
exactly. And I think it extends even to the career now. There's certainly a lot of talk out there around, even if you're, again, going to work for the corporations, you're going to work in sales for corporations, you have to think of it as an entrepreneurial venture in some ways, as in, I'm going to build my network so that I have opportunities. And the corporation doesn't own my network. And I'm going to go get involved in professional organizations, or I'm going to write some stuff around the law profession or whatever it is that I'm doing, where I'm known, not just my company is known, where it's some of that belongs to me.
Yes. And here's another thing that I am hearing out there is that the world as we know it, it's going to be a little bit less company focused and a little bit more focused on gig work, where you're coming in with something that you know how to do and not necessarily working for the company, but they're hiring you to do specific things. So that's something, yes, I think that we have to see and watch how the world's changing on that aspect. But getting back to how does the high school and parent of juniors and seniors, how do they set their kid up for success? Because when you say, well, Brad, you just go out and figure out something that you know you can fix. What I hear parents saying and kids saying is, oh my gosh, there's so much. How do I ever figure it out what I'm going to be good at and what I can do? And I'm telling you, it all centers around having these career conversations with this high school student to talk about what are you interested in doing? Like, what types of roles would you be interested in? And even saying that, parents are like, oh my gosh, that's so much. But I will tell you, these kids want to have these conversations. I've gone out and asked them. I'm like, guys, is this too stressful? Is this too much to have these career conversations? And hands down, 100%, every kid has told me, they're like, why would we not want to have these conversations? You know, why do we not want to start figuring out what we want to do now versus waiting until I'm getting ready to go into college, or I'm graduating from college, or I've graduated and I'm sitting here with this degree and I don't know what to do with it. They want to have these conversations. And I think the key to it is helping them really kind of hone in on what activities within a job are truly going to make you happy. And there are different layers of this in my mind. It is talking about interests because they know the things they're interested in today. Layering over skills, talking about what are their strengths. There's so much that they can be talking about that will help kind of push them into a direction. I always call it the pie shape. I'm like, if in this whole big circle, there are all the careers, how do we get you in here? Where we at least know this is your sweet spot and this is where we want you, you know, or where you want you really is the true answer. And even having conversations like, what do you know you don't want to do? You know,
Right.
I've started conversations with, what do you think is the worst job that you could ever think of? And I always bring up, you know, cleaning out the porta potties is definitely a job I don't really want, you know, but
Yes.
it gets them having fun and talking about this versus like this, got to figure it out. You don't have to figure it all out, but you do have to start making decisions. And I think that's where parents get confused because they want to get to the answer so fast. And I'm like, just start having the conversation, start letting this unfold and listen for the patterns of the things you hear over and over so that, you know, we can get that kid into that pie shape.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think that's, if kids get into the areas that either they enjoy or they excel, that's a really good first step. And again, this is probably another podcast, but I think for a lot of families, and I don't know what the percentages are, maybe you could come up with some numbers, but I would say roughly 50% of kids are very focused. I want to be an engineer. I want to be a nurse. I want to be a teacher. I've already, my career path is pretty clear, and they may be wrong and they may change career paths. That's also true, but at least they have one versus the other side of that coin, which is either I like just about everything I touch. So I can't decide if I want to be a musician or a mathematician because it's all fun. I enjoy it all, or none of it speaks to me. I'm not really interested in science. I'm not interested in, what courses in high school did you like the most? None of them. I hated school. Okay, well, that said that in question. How do we, so what do you see out there? Is it 50-50 or is it 70-30 or?
Gosh, that's such a loaded question because a lot of times I'll have students come to me and they're like, I'm going to be an engineer. I'm like, great. Why are you going to be an engineer? Because my dad told me I'd be good at it. That's not the right answer, Brad. In fact, to me, that's one of those answers that's the scariest because we've, as parents, have made really good decisions for our kids, for the most part. So our kids trust us to make some of those decisions. And quite frankly, when we're talking about this career idea, it's daunting. It's daunting for everybody. And sometimes for a kid, it's easier to hit the easy button and say, well, Dad thought I should be an engineer, so I guess I'm going to be an engineer. They get into school, guess what happens? They hate it, or, and they don't know how to get out of it, or they are afraid to go and talk to their parents and say, that's really not what I want to do. And now we're in trouble. So I'm going to tell you that your 50% is way too high.
Okay.
I think it's much lower that they even have an idea of what they want to do. And here's something that a lot of people don't understand. Most kids, they can name 10 to 12 careers out of
Right.
the thousands of careers that are out there. So their
Yes.
little world is so small. They've got no idea what they can do. And when you start having these conversations, now you can expand on it, right? You can start going, well, you know what? If you want to, I'll use Noah. He's one of my favorite go-tos in this conversation. When he came to me, he's like, Kristin, I don't know what I want to do, but one of my interests is golf. We talked about golf. And, when he was speaking about golf, he was leaning into the camera. His voice went up, his eyes lit up. And I was like, if you could do something around golf, would that make you happy? He goes, yeah, but I'm not going to be a player. I'm like, there's a lot you can do in golf. And when we started talking about his skills, he was creative. He was good at juggling a lot of things. He was good with people. And all of a sudden, where we ended up is he's off getting a landscape architect degree to ultimately build golf courses.
Hmm.
Right. So it wasn't a straight and narrow shot. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So I guess maybe you need to rephrase it a little bit. And I would say, according to the parents, because I'm talking mostly to parents, according to the parents, about 50% have a path and 50% don't. And what you're saying is maybe a big chunk of what the parents think is figured out and solid should be explored a little deeper. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely fair. When my little guy, he used to sit down with a stack of paper and tape, and he'd build these big stadiums, like in detail. In my head, as a parent, I was like, he's probably going to be an architect or a builder or construction because he's got this great spatial, he understood it all. No, you know what he does? He
Not
works, you don't know, but I'll tell you, you will soon. He works in equipment management for football teams. He loved stadiums. He loved that atmosphere of stadiums. So as parents, we can think that we know, but we do not.
right.
That's why I keep saying, yes, the parents that are coming to you, you know what they're hearing? What's the soup du jour in the high schools? When my oldest was on the football team and they had parent night, I'd say 8 out of 10 of the kids were going to get into kinesiology. Do we need that
Yep.
many kinesiologists? No, we don't, right? We
Right.
don't need that many personal trainers and physical therapy people, et cetera. So even though they think they know, they've just scratched the surface of having these conversations.
Right. Okay. Well, let's wrap things up here. Can you tell people a little bit more about some of the things you have going on as far as services and so forth?
Yes. So if during this conversation you felt like, oh my gosh, where in the heck do I start? One of the things I've found, and I was asked for quite a while, Brad, to do is to start something for parents. Now I coach kids one-on-one to figure out career paths, but the parents were like, well, what about the parents that really want to be a part of this at home? And so I started Parent Lab, where we come together first and third Fridays at noon. And we sit down and we talk about what's going on in your house and how do you handle certain situations. And really more, how do you start having these conversations around careers so that your kid does go to college very confident that they know what they're wanting to do. When they go there, they're not changing their major because they're clear on what they want to do. So they're getting out in the 4 years that it should take to get out versus the 5.5 that we're seeing most kids take, which how that affects people's financial well-being. It's an
Right.
extra $50,000, which who wants to do that if they don't have to? Parent Lab's a great way for parents just to kind of come in and say, help me, help my kids. How do we have these conversations?
Right. Okay. And if they're interested, obviously they can get to your website and we'll put all that in the show notes and in the YouTube comments. I guess that's all we have for today. Any final words?
I just say, guys, get out there and let's start having fun. Let's make work something fun because it can be, especially when you're in the right place and doing the right thing.
That's right. Just do it. Okay. That's all for today. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Now it's time for you to take action. Head to tamingthehighcostofcollege.com for show notes, bonus content, and to leave feedback for Brad. The next step on your college journey starts now.
Brad Baldridge is a registered representative of Cambridge Investment Research and an investment advisor representative of Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Securities are offered through Cambridge Investment Research Incorporated, a broker-dealer and member of FINRA and SIPC. Brad owns two companies, Baldridge Wealth Management and Baldridge College Solutions. The Baldridge companies are not affiliated with Cambridge Investment Research.